Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm Erin Watari from the Fulbright Teacher Exchange Program, hosting from rainy McSnow, Washington, D.C. We are very grateful to have you join us today, as I know many of you have busy schedules and some of you are rushing home to join us this evening. I would like to introduce our keynote, Honor Mormon. Some of you may have met Honor at Atlanta or Denver this year at the Fulbright Classroom Teacher Exchange October workshop. Honor is the Associate Director for Professional Development and Curriculum at Asia Society's Partnership for Global Learning. She was previously an educational consultant supporting the Asia Society's International Studies School Network. For 11 years, Honor was on the faculty of the International School of the Americas as an English language arts teacher, internship and service learning coordinator, and Dean of Instruction for English and Social Studies. Honor has also taught pre-service teachers at Texas State University and Trinity University and served as a secondary literacy specialist for the Northeast Independent School District. She was formerly a co-director of the San Antonio Writing Project and associate editor for National Council of Teachers of English Voices from the Middle. Tonight, our event is broken up into two sections. In between the sections, we will open it up for questions and answers. If you have any questions, please type your questions in the question box, and we will do our best to answer all of them during the event. Without further ado, we are delighted to have Honor join us from California. Honor, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Erin, and thanks to everyone for being here. I'm really excited to talk with you today about the importance of preparing students for the world that we live in and doing that by helping them develop their global competence. So I just want to say a quick word about Asia Society for those of you who didn't meet me last fall. Some of you might know that Asia Society is a global nonprofit organization working to strengthen relationships and promote understanding among people and leaders and institutions in the U.S. and Asia. But you might not know a lot about our education work. We do work in all of these areas that you see here, the arts, business, and policy. And in education, our mission in particular is to help make students globally competent and ready for the 21st century. And so that's what I want to talk with you about. But before we get any further into my presentation, I would just like to get a quick sense of who's here. So if you don't mind, if you would please respond to a couple of polls. The first one, just to find out what your teaching role is, whether you're elementary or secondary and what subject area, or if you are an alum and maybe you've moved in a different direction, you can choose other for other kinds of roles that you might play. Okay, great. Looks like almost everyone has voted. Just give you one more second. Anyone else? I'm going to share the results. So we're pretty evenly distributed, which is fine because I tried to prepare a little something for everyone. And I see that we have a slight edge with world language teachers, and other than that, we're spread all across. So hopefully there's a little something for everyone in what I'm going to share with you. And I just have one more question for you to give me a sense of kind of where you are. I wanted to find out where you see yourself in this journey of going global. So if you would just give me an indication of whether you're in the beginning stages, just thinking about it or getting started, whether you're doing some things and wanting to do more, or whether you feel like you've made some progress and you're looking to go more broadly or more deeper into your work with global education. So just think about that for a second. Give us a sense of where you think you are. All right, so again, pretty evenly distributed, but we do have a lot of folks who are ready to broaden their efforts, and I hope that the resources and strategies I'm going to share with you today will help you do just that. So let's get into what I've prepared, and as Erin said, please feel free to pop your questions into the control panel at any time, and I'll be taking those shortly. So I have three kind of guiding questions for us to consider together. The first being just around what is global competence. I want to spend a little time unpacking the dimensions of global competence with you. And I also want to spend a very brief amount of time talking about why it's so important. So looking at why global competence is essential, particularly in today's world and tomorrow's world that our kids are moving into. And then I want to spend most of our time looking at how can we help students develop global competence. So we're going to look at different strategies and resources for teaching those knowledge, skills, and dispositions that they need in order to be successful members of global society. So we'll start with the second question first, actually, the why question. And I'd like to start with you, and I think it's important for us as teachers to start with our students. So I'm going to ask you one more poll question, but I would like for you to think about this in terms of not only yourself but also your students and where you see evidence of the global society that we live in your everyday local lives. So the question is, which of these are some of the ways that you think students as well as yourself experience globalization? And for this question, you can choose more than one response. So do you think students see globalization socially? In other words, do they connect with people maybe online or in other countries, or do they learn about other places in the world through media and new technologies? Do you think they experience it culturally? Do they have exchange students maybe in your school, or are there recent immigrants in your community? Do you think they experience it economically? Do they have a sense of the global path that products they buy have traveled? Or do you think they think about it environmentally? Are they involved in things that would indicate to you that they're thinking about the choices they make around the environment from a global perspective? And then finally, what about politically? Do you think students experience globalization by paying attention to foreign relations or world news and those kinds of things? I'll give you a couple more minutes so everyone can indicate where you and your students have this greatest impact in your own lives at your local community level. Okay, so I'll show you what you said. Looks like all of you think that they experience it through media and technology, and lots through culture and economics, and a little bit less so on the environment and politics end, which makes sense. It might also have to do with the ages of your students and things like that. So keep those in mind as we move through some of this content, and think about what questions you might have in terms of how to integrate some of those strands of globalization into your curriculum as well. So obviously, the world is changing fast, and there are these skills that students need now and certainly will need in their future in order to engage with all of these different global aspects of their experience. And the former Vice President for Education at Asia Society, now a senior advisor for us, Vivian Stewart, wrote an article with the tagline, "The future is here. It's multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multilingual." And in this article, she pointed to 4 trends that have sort of brought around this increased globalization. And so certainly we see these in our own lives, and we need students to see how they play out and are becoming an ever-present part of our everyday reality. So, for example, with health and security, we want students to start to see that every major issue, whether it's environmental degradation, or global warming, diseases, energy, water, even terrorism and peace and justice issues. All of these have an international dimension. And we can do that through, I think, all of our content areas in different ways. So I think it's natural for us to view our role as teachers in terms of preparing students for their future as adults, as members of the workforce. And because the economy is increasingly global, I think every sector is going to have an international component, and so that's what students really do need to be ready for. There's another quote about the future from William Gibson. He's a science fiction writer, and I think this is an interesting perspective. He says, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. So certainly it does have to do with the economy, but in addition to thinking about the sort of competitive edge that we want students to have, I would like for us to also think about the fact that they just need to be able to operate in a linguistically and culturally diverse society, but they need to be able to understand the complex nature of the challenges that we all face. And really, it's the case, and this paper from NEA makes the case that global competence is a 21st century imperative for all of our students. And likewise, this report just came out a few months ago from the U.S. Department of Ed, talking about the importance of international education for all students, and they cited some of the same reasons for why it's so important. So finally, I just want to point out that as we were thinking about those global issues that impact us locally, it's by finding solutions to things locally with a consideration for the global that I think we're going to make progress, and we're going to move into the future that is better for everyone. So I really also admire Mark Gerzon's work, and if you don't know it, I encourage you to find out a little bit more about him and his book. So he talks about global citizenship, and he really thinks about it as one planetary family. So our genes are global, our food is global, economics, environment, all of these things we've been talking about are global, and so therefore he says that we're all global citizens. So I just kind of want to leave you with that thought as we move into things that we can do in the classroom. How can we help prepare students to be global citizens? In that report I was just mentioning, they cite this quote from Arne Duncan as well, so that we need to help our students not only be competitors but collaborators and compassionate neighbors. I really liked that part. And here's a definition of global citizens from Oxfam. So all of the slides that I'm sharing with you, I realize I'm going a little fast at this point, so these are all available to you afterwards. Erin will send you the link if she hasn't already, and you'll be able to go back to them and download them and all the sources and things if you wanted to follow their trail and look further into some of these resources. So let's talk about that first question. What are global competencies? So one way we can look at it is to think about them as 21st century skills applied to the world. And so certainly when you look at different sets of 21st century skills that have been articulated, for example, these by the Metairie group, you'll see that they're calling out multicultural literacy and global awareness among, in this case, in the category of digital age literacy, which I think is interesting. I do personally think that in order to be a good global citizen, in some ways you almost have to become a digital citizen, because that's one of the major ways that we are able to connect and collaborate with each other internationally. And then if you look at, for example, the Partnership for 21st Century Skills, they've also articulated these international themes that they feel are important for 21st century learning, and you'll see there are several that resonate with what we've been talking about in terms of global issues. And then finally, the Educational Technology Standards from S.A.G.E has a section around communication and collaboration that very specifically points to global awareness and cultural understanding. So what we've done at Asia Society is to try to define global competence, and I'd like to start with the definition and then unpack it for you just a little bit. And all of this next little section comes from a book which you can freely download from the internet. So there's the direct link to grab the book. And so you'll see that some of the resources I'm going to highlight are there, and I encourage you to find the book and read the whole thing or look through it to go back to these resources in more detail. So the definition is here and it's in the book as well. We say global competence is the capacity and disposition to understand and act on issues of global significance. So this is a very tightly packed definition, and we're going to look at some of the different things that are indicated here. You should know too that this definition comes out of the work of a global competence task force, which was formed and led by not only Asia Society but also the Council of Chief State School Officers. And they identified these 4 domains that you're looking at now, which cut across all of the content areas. So if you'll notice in the middle, the idea that content knowledge matters, and that we also want to push towards interdisciplinary understanding. These competencies are not isolated skills, but they're interrelated, and students need to engage in these different ways throughout all of their curriculum. So we want them to be investigating the world beyond their immediate environment, where they can actually start framing the problems, conducting well-crafted and age-appropriate research. And we want them to do that in every subject. Recognizing perspectives, others, but also their own, and articulating and explaining those thoughtfully and respectfully. Communicating ideas effectively with diverse audiences to bridge any kinds of geographic, linguistic, or other cultural barriers that might exist, and then taking action to improve the conditions once they've learned about all of these things. How can they see themselves as a player in the world and really participate reflectively in some kind of action? So those are our 4 domains, and when you look at the book, you'll see that there is actually a set of matrices, one that defines global competence, and we won't take the time to look at the document now, but you'll have it in the book. And here's a quick snapshot of what you'll find. So all about recognizing perspectives, communicating obviously, finding evidence, and so on and so forth. And then, as I mentioned, I think it's really important that we don't just say global competence is the responsibility of the world language teacher or the social studies teacher, but that we infuse it across the curriculum. And so you'll find in the book also matrices for all of the content areas. They're still divided into those 4 domains, but they're specific to those subjects. So I have my next question for you now, and I'm curious to know which of the 4 domains that I just described are you emphasizing the most in your curriculum? And again, you can select more than one here, but of those 4 areas, where do you think students are already doing a lot of work in your classroom? Give everyone just a minute to vote. If you want to pick 2, that's fine, or 3 or more. Okay, great. Show you what you said. Not exactly what I often hear, although half of it is what I always hear. So it looks like you're doing a lot of recognizing perspectives and a fair amount of investigating the world and communicating ideas, and taking action is the hard piece. So that helps me know how to use the rest of our time. I'm probably going to speed through some of the things that I had prepared around recognizing perspectives so that we can really get into the take action part. So I'm going to actually skip the next slide because I don't need to ask you. I can already tell which ones you want to emphasize more would be the ones where you have less going on at the moment, and that's a good goal. So in the book, you're also going to find this list of different approaches to globalizing your curriculum. But for today's webinar, I wanted to just frame it around the 4 domains. So we're going to start with the first 2. And as I just said, I think I'll move a little bit more quickly here to leave more time to talk about taking action with you at the end. But let me kind of quickly survey what I brought to share with you around investigating the world and recognizing perspectives. I have a lot of resources, and maybe some of these are familiar and maybe some of them are not. Actually, first I have just a thought about maps. You know, I'm sure you all have maps in your classroom, maps in your schools, but my question is, do you have different kinds of maps? And what do those different maps represent? And what do they tell us? And what do they not tell us? I've started listening to some of the old episodes of the This American Life podcast, if you're familiar with it. And it's quite a great show, and there was an episode on maps that got me thinking about this again. So I'm just showing you a variety of different perspectives on the geographic Earth, which I think can lead to some really great conversations with kids. This one, you know, is considered to be the upside down map, but there's no reason why it should be upside down since the Earth is spinning and there's no particular orientation in space. And then if you haven't seen this, I used to use this with students in an activity where I actually cut out the other countries, China, the US, India, and so on, and had students see how many they could fit into a cutout of Africa. So I think maps in particular can help point out some of our assumptions or our misconceptions that we might have and help us kind of look at things from a new perspective. And along that line, there's these really great cartograms from World Mapper. So if you're having students look at any number of global issues, you can go to World Mapper and find the cartograms that will depict how that issue is distributed around the world. So whether it's food scarcity or education, or in this case, water resources, so on and so forth. So that's a pretty great set of maps, and I've given you all the links here for the ones that I just showed you. Speaking of cartograms, I also think, you know, visual data is really helpful for kids. So sometimes, at least for me, not being particularly mathematically inclined, statistics get really overwhelming, and I think it's useful to kind of boil those statistics down. So you've probably seen one of these next examples I'm going to show you. There's actually 3 kind of similar projects where they're looking at the world as if it were a community of 100 people so that the statistics are a little bit more manageable. And this website has lesson plans, photographs, some of which are taken by students, videos on a variety of global issues. And then, of course, it's all based around this idea that if the world were 100 people, 26 of them would be children.
Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt. It seems that the screens are stuck on the quick poll. That once you started in the, now I think it's working again. So now I'm looking at the 100 people.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
So I apologize to those of you who are watching and not seeing what I was talking about. I think it will actually be captured in the recording. So rather than go back, I'll just let you download the slides, and you'll see those maps and things. Thanks, Erin. So 100 People is a great website for that. If you have those of you who teach younger students, there's also a picture book sort of along this line that you may already know about, If the World Were a Village. And I think these work for all ages. These are sort of visual data around these different questions of equity and distribution globally. So you can see the ideas about where people have different access to resources and so on and so forth. So here's a similar idea. This is a poster, and then there's actually an app too that tells you how much water your it takes to produce another product that you might be consuming. And this infographic was actually created by a colleague of mine. If you look over to the top left, shows you the little half person learning American learning Chinese compared with all of those people Chinese learning English. And so, as I was saying, just as a visual way to kind of grab onto the statistics, I think infographics make a really strong visual impact. And infographics are something you can have students create too. So as they're learning about something, this is a great way for them to share what they have understood through visual data. This one, as you can see, is also kind of a map, but this shows the country codes for internet research. So this is one of the things that I feel really strongly about if we're going to have students researching global topics. They need to learn how to find websites from other countries, and the way to do that is to search within the specific extension of that country code. So this is a quick way to look up some of those more prevalent country codes. And then population is a big topic now, especially after we hit 7 billion. So I know all kids probably don't have access to iPads. There is a really cool app from National Geographic, but even if you don't have the iPad, they have a great website. And in this case, it's an interactive infographic. So I think it's important to use things like infographics and visual data for students to really make meaning out of these global statistics. And then some of them are interactive. So if you don't know about Gapminder, I highly, highly recommend that you check this out. It actually shows the relationship between different factors. So health and wealth, for example. You can track over time. The little bubbles represent countries. The colors indicate the continent that they're in, the size, the population, and the bubbles will get bigger over time as population increases. And then they'll move around on this graph based on the relationship. So for example, here you can see the relationship is between life expectancy and income. So this is a great tool. I think it's clearly something math teachers and social studies teachers can use, but I actually think every subject area can find some topics that relate to their curriculum that you might want to have students exploring using this tool. And then while you're there, if you haven't already, you should watch some of Hans Rosling's TED Talks. He's the guy who created that Gapminder, and he has these fabulous TED Talks. So speaking of infographics, as I was saying, you can have kids make these. And so I've created a way to search for infographics using a custom search box. So if you follow this link later, you'll be able to specifically just search infographics. And then also tools for creating them are available from this other link that I'm providing you with. So hopefully you will check those out. And I want to just talk briefly about images and stories, and then I'm going to stop for questions. So obviously as an English language arts teacher, I used images and stories a lot, but I also have worked with folks in other content areas to integrate them. Here's a resource that I recommend in particular because these photographs were taken by young people around the world, and this link will also take you to some lesson plans that were developed. And there's so many great things we can do with photographs, just having students, think about what happened before the photograph, what happened after the photograph, what's going on around beyond the edges of the photograph that you can't see. And just thinking about how, how photographs capture a moment in time, and in order to really understand that moment, you need to understand something about the context, the people, the time, the situation that they're in. And so I think it can lead to a lot of good question asking, and that's one of those things that we want to really nurture through this aspect of global competence around investigating the world, is we want students to be able to ask good questions that they can then research and find the answers to. And then I want to mention a couple of books that you might want to recommend if you don't already have these in your school library. This first one is called Material World, and just to give you an idea of this project, the photographer went around and had families take out all their earthly possessions, basically, and put them outside of their home, and then he photographed the family with all of their possessions. It's a very interesting way to kind of compare ways of life, and I hope whatever subject you teach that you're kind of brainstorming ways that you could use images like these in your classroom to have students discussing and exploring, and to lead them through some kind of inquiry that would get at one of the curricular areas that you want to address. And then he followed that up with Hungry Planet, which came out recently. Same idea, except here the families are pulling everything out of their pantry, so we can see what they typically eat in a period of time. There's the US family, and here are the other ones. So those are some great photography resources. Of course, there's tons of other photographs to be found, and also it's great to have students use photographs to create digital stories to share what they're learning. But I wanted to make sure you knew about those. And you know, when I think about different perspectives, it always makes me think about this parable that you probably have heard about, the blind men and the elephant, and they each feel a different part of the elephant, and they think he's a different creature. For those of you in the elementary classroom, just to make sure you know, there's a picture book version of the story with 7 blind mice, and so that's worth checking out. And speaking of picture books, there's also the classic story by Leo Leone called Fish is Fish, where the fish thinks everybody else must be a fish too because that's all he knows. So I think there's just lots of different ways that we can get students thinking about how we each live in our own perspective. We see the world through a particular lens, and we have to be conscious and active and really purposeful and intentional about trying to look at the world through other lenses. Here's another great TED Talk that I recommend about the danger of a single story. And so this author, I have a quote here from her, but she tells her own story about reading books that did not represent her own culture and didn't connect with her identity, and that it's so important to be careful that we're reading from lots of different perspectives. And so there's a parable that I always think about with that from the Igbo tribe. Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So if you're a social studies history teacher, you know this is particularly true, that we need to read accounts of historical incidents from all different sides. I also really think critical literacy questions are helpful for everyone. So asking questions about the power relationships in the text. Who has power in this particular story? Whose voice is silenced? And whose version of reality is really coming through. And so even to interrogate our textbooks, you know, and newspaper articles and things that are meant to be subjective, but for students to have that awareness and that critical approach to all the text, whether it be a map or an infographic, an advertisement, a video, anything that they're encountering needs to be looked at that way. So I'm going to pause there for questions about investigating the world and recognizing perspectives.
Hi, Honor. This is Erin. I just wanted to talk with you really quickly that a lot of the questions have come in about the PowerPoint, and that I wanted to let everybody know after the presentation we will do our best to upload this recording onto YouTube, and we'll have that available on the Fulbright Teacher page, and then also we'll send out the link to access the PowerPoint itself. I know that a lot of people were asking about getting access to the hyperlinks and whatnot, and they should be able to do that in the PowerPoint, correct?
Yes, or Erin, if you don't mind, when I move into the next section, if you can grab the link to the slides, you can just give it to everyone right now in the chat, and then they'll have it before they even leave. That would be great too.
That's a great idea. Alrighty, I will do that right now. Thank you.
Are there any other questions about anything I mentioned or any other ideas that you have before we move on to the next? Okay. So let's talk about communicating ideas and taking action, since it sounds like that's where a lot of people are ready to do more work with their students. And first, I just want to introduce this acronym that we use when we're thinking about summative tasks in particular, but really, thinking about big units of study, whether it's project-based or other kinds of curricular design that we're doing. We've developed this acronym that really helps us ensure that we're giving students all the best opportunities we can to develop their global competence. And so S.A.G.E stands for Student Choice, Authentic Work, Global Significance, and Exhibition to a Real-World Audience. So we have some kind of guiding questions that we want to ask ourselves. Obviously, we want to make sure students have some kind of choices, at least about one of these three things, if not more than one: content, process, or product. I think if we have to dictate one or two of those things, then certainly we can find ways for students to have some room for choice in the other areas. And then we want students doing real-world work that is akin to what adult professionals are actually doing in different career areas aligned with our content area, right? So if we're teaching math, then we want to think about what does an architect really do with this math, or what is an engineer or someone else who uses math in a real-world context, what kinds of projects and global issues are they actually working on, and how can we get students to experience that as part of their learning experience. And then global significance, we're going to obviously want to make sure that we're giving students significant issues where they can engage in all of those 4 domains of global competence. And then we want students, at least at the end, if not several times throughout a unit or project, to be able to present their work to an authentic audience, whether that's live or through web-based publication. There's a variety of ways that they can do that, and we want to give them those experiences. In the book that I mentioned, and I hope that's the first link that you follow, is to go download the book. There's a checklist for teaching for global competence, and the first set of questions are around that idea of global significance. So checking to make sure that what you've designed meets those characteristics. And then identifying topics of global significance. I think it's both easy and a challenge at the same time. I think there's lots of sort of lists that people go to, for example, the Millennium Development Goals, that kind of can guide us in terms of what are the big issues that students need to start to learn about, grapple with. And on the other hand, these are big. These are very big topics, and so they might really almost be too broad in some sense for a focused unit of study. So there's some other resources that I often look at just to get some brainstorming around what are some global issues that I can align with my curriculum. One of which is this book called High Noon, 20 Global Problems and 20 Years to Solve Them. And in this book, he organizes those problems into 3 categories. So we have issues around sharing our planet, then we have issues around sharing our humanity. Some of these are pretty controversial in some ways. And then we have issues around sharing our, as he says, sharing our rule book, or issues where we have to figure out how to have some common ground rules or understandings. But as you can see, these are a little bit more granular than those Millennium Development Goals, although they complement and align to them as well. And then I found one other source that unfortunately is no longer available online. There used to be an ebook version of this, but it might be something for your library or to put in your classroom library. It's a collection of photojournalist essays, and they're organized around some different themes. And what I like about this book is that there's a wide variety of topics, and so if you're giving students choice, for example, and students can choose any of the different topics in here, some of them are a little less heavy than others, and you may have students who sort of emotionally are not really ready to look at death and dying or war or things like that as their first foray into a global topic. So this gives some other options related to pop culture and distribution of wealth and things like that. So back to S.A.G.E, we talked a little bit about global significance, and now I really want to kind of give you my big suggestions for how to engage students, what to have students actually doing as they're working with these issues. And so in the book, you also do have this list of example performances for taking action. So lots of you wanted to work on that, and this is a great place to go. Just take a look at this list and see which of these would be aligned to your curriculum, and just pick one and start there. And then I want to suggest some sort of big categories of ways of getting kids engaged in taking action. And the first of these is through youth action networks. So when you follow this link, it will take you to a whole bunch of resources that you can use to get students doing one of two things. One is have them publish their work online. So these three organizations, they have kind of similar names. They're all three student news outlets, and they all have student reporters basically publishing articles around current events. They could do op-ed pieces. They accept both written and video format, and photography, I think, too, in one case or another. And so if you have older students, I think this is a really great way to give them an authentic purpose and a real world audience, because other young people will go on the site and comment on their news stories, and they'll know that they're out there for the whole world to see. And so, of course, their pride in their work and their sense of ownership and wanting to do their best work always goes up, I find, when we're posting to the World Wide Web. So those are three places to do that. And then the other thing you'll find on that list of youth networks are service learning organizations. So that's another key way that you can make connections between something in your curriculum and having students engage in some service as part of what they're learning about. So in general, these are the three guiding questions that we suggest. So think about the global issue that you've selected or that students have selected, and then have them ask themselves, where else in the world is this an issue? And maybe just choose one or two other countries and do some comparison between what are those countries doing, what are the particulars of their situation. Maybe they have the same issue but slightly different variations on the problem. Or students may need to figure out, how does this global issue connect with our local community, right? So they may need to survey folks in the community who have an understanding of the international connections, or they may need to just look with a different perspective on their own resource use or whatever the topic might be. And then obviously in doing this, they're going to start to see some of the similarities and differences between their own community and communities around the world. And while most students probably won't have the chance to do service globally, although of course you can do fundraising that can have an impact globally, or you can do letter writing, or you can send messages. It's a little harder to do a real hands-on service project for a global community, but helping students see that the local service that they're doing does address that global issue is really important. And then, so that's one category of take action. Another category is looking for simulations. And I know several of you are world language teachers, and there are actually some additional resources I didn't have in here that I'm going to add. So I'll update this to give you some ideas about some places you can go to connect with other language teachers. But these are some of the ones that we often turn to have kids participate in a simulation around a global issue. Model United Nations, you probably heard of. World Affairs Challenge is a really good one. the Icons project from the University of Maryland. These are all organized around those kinds of topics that I just talked about, and students take on the roles of different participants, and they really work through solving the problems collaboratively. So sometimes you might want to design your own simulation. I know at our school we had several. One of the ones that probably a lot of people have seen is having students simulate an immigration experience, what it's like to arrive at Ellis Island or some other location as an immigrant. And so things like that where they can actually role play and get those perspectives. But then in order to really get students to take a simulation and turn it into some real world action, I find that project-based learning is probably the key way to do that. So posing a problem or having students pose a problem with a driving question, and then having them explore different alternatives, figure out what they think their best strategy would be, and then actually seeing that project through. So that could tie back to service learning, or it could tie to other kinds of actions like making a public service announcement to spread awareness in their community, things like that. And so if you aren't really familiar with project-based learning, my go-to source for that is the Buck Institute, and this is their kind of model. So you can see this aligns really well with our S.A.G.E idea that students need choices, and they need public audience, and so on and so forth. Here's one example. There are actually so many examples of this. It's a whole nother presentation that I do for people, but this is a project-based learning experience. It's also a global collaboration project. So Taking It Global offers a number of these, and this is a pretty famous example where students participating in the deforestation project actually monitored deforestation through satellite imaging, and participated actively in the campaign to save the rainforests. And so this is the kind of thing that students can do to have a global impact using technology and using their networking together collaboratively online. So different groups from different countries were all participating in this same project, and there are a number of these. I really do, this is kind of my last thought about taking action, is I really do advocate trying a global collaboration project if you haven't done that before. Basically what it means is just pairing your class with another class in another country, at least one other group, either for a short period of time, or you can do it for a long period of time and with multiple groups. You can start small or jump in and do something a little bit more complicated, but there are tons of these out there. And so you're going to have a link or two here that you can follow to go find some projects that already exist. And again, from the world language teachers, there's a number of these specifically around students practicing their different language skills. So those are great for everybody, including world languages. So I think students need to learn how to collaborate, and the only way they're really going to develop the skill of collaborating internationally is to experience it. And so here, for example, is an elementary classroom. This is kind of gotten to be a well-known photograph from Sylvia Tolosano, where she's helping teachers orchestrate these Skype events. So you can't even really see the one person who's talking on Skype, but all these kids have a role to play in the event, where they're Skyping with someone in another country. They're getting that firsthand experience of that other perspective, and they're doing real-world active learning about the topic. So I'm really passionate about global collaboration projects. I wrote a two-part blog on our Ed Week blog. So when you follow this link, that's one way you can learn about them. Another great way to learn about what people are doing and be inspired by their stories is to go to the Connect All Schools website and see examples of what folks are doing, how they're matched up with other teachers and what their kids are working on together. And then if you decide to try one of these projects, you should be sure and share your story here on the site as well. And so then finally, as I said, this is a whole another presentation that I do, and so please take a look at the many, many examples that are out there. There's no need to create it from scratch. You can just join an existing project. I think that's the best way to kind of get your feet wet and learn what it takes, because you have to, as the teacher, you have to collaborate with the other teachers too. So it's actually a really good learning experience. And I think for you guys, having made connections with teachers in other countries, you have an ideal situation where I'm hoping you can find a way to continue that relationship and connect your students. So my last question for you, and then I will take questions. My last question is about what you are thinking of doing based on what you've heard and what you're going to have in the slides when you look at them later. So you can choose more than one of these if you want. Let us know what you think will be most useful using the resources I've shared with you, exploring some more. There's networks you can join to meet up with other global educators. So for example, if you're not already a member of the Global Education Conference Network, I highly recommend that as a place to meet other folks who are like-minded with us and share resources and possibly find a partner for a collaboration project, or see some great examples of what people are doing and see if you can adapt it for your classroom. All right, so great. Looks like things are useful to you. I'm going to show you the results of the poll, and then Erin, let me know what questions we should answer.
Honor, thank you very much. I just want to let you know we're coming up to about 5 minutes into our 60-minute presentation. We did have one question come in. The question is, does News Action publish articles in languages other than English?
I don't know that that one does. So I do think I've seen some other places where students can publish in other languages though. So when I add to the slides, I will see if I can add those in there. I feel like I've at least seen a couple of sites that are similar to News Action that have students writing in Spanish and maybe a few other Romance languages, but I'm not sure if you teach another language. I haven't, but my colleagues might know. I can also, we have a whole Chinese language initiative in our department, and they would probably know if there are some, for example, for students who are learning Mandarin. So hopefully that just kind of gave you a survey of some of the things that are out there, and then you'll decide which links you want to follow in the slides, and some of those will take you to whole lists of additional links, and others will just take you directly to my favorite resource on that topic. So I hope everybody found something that you feel like you can follow up on and start to integrate, and definitely know that you're not alone in wanting to work on taking action with students. I think that's the biggest area where we're trying to support people. It's definitely hard work, but it's very gratifying and worthwhile to see what happens when students are doing meaningful work and they're really seeing a real world impact. So, Erin, are there any other questions?
Nope, you're getting a lot of praise, and people are very grateful for you taking the time. So thank you. Also, Honor, on behalf of the Fulbright teacher program, we're grateful for you taking the time. I know that teachers are definitely in different places in processing global competence, so I appreciate you supporting our teachers. So thank you very much, and thank you all teachers for participating.